up, everybody? Axe Wizard here, back with another update for my game Neurality 3092. Apologize for last devlog. I was a zombie by the time I recorded that because it was like midnight. I was pretty tired. But anyway, I rested, I ate dinner, I'm full of energy, I'm excited to unveil a new feature I just made. So let's check it out. So first things first, let me make this maximized, is I implemented a save system. That's the big thing I implemented. So you'll see here, I click new because I've been doing that the entire time. It says a save file exists. Are you sure you wish to overwrite? Well, no, I don't want to overwrite it. So I'm going to hit load. And look at that. I just launched into a system and I'm already back in. So the cool thing about this is with this save system, I save in 3 places. So I save whenever you enter a star system, I save whenever you land at a star system, and then I guess technically there's 4 places right now. Whenever you do trades, it saves your player data. So you can see here I've already got 10 tons of food supplies in my hold here, and I've got like 53,000 credits right now. So if I sell all those, bam, I got more. I'm going to pick up some gold for my return journey, finalize that bad boy. So once I hit finalize, that saves my player data, which has like, you know, my inventory and stuff. And then when I leave, it saves again. So basically it has auto saves all the time. I don't know if I should add a save option here. It saves often enough that I don't know if you necessarily need to do that, but it wouldn't hurt, so I might just add that in as well. But let's, yeah. So what this will allow me to do is that now that I've got this ironed out, it affects basically everything. I've got a little weird thing happening where there's like some question marks over the Genesis still, which is weird. But it also stores, it also keeps track of like world data. So that's what I call it. Just anything that's like not player data, I just say it's world data. So that way I can access player data in places where I need to, such as the shipyard window that I'm working on. But it also saves the world data. So you can see here I've explored these star systems already. I haven't explored this one yet. So that's just the ship testing combat one anyway for now. But so I've got all the save stuff working. And if I was to, I don't know, like have a crash or something like that and just close out of it, well, it saved it as soon as I entered the star system. So if I run it again and load, I'm right back where I was, including like all my inertia, my velocity that I was traveling at. So I have everything here. I got the gold. I can trade it. Bam. Now I'm up to like 70,000 credits now. Sweet. So I'm going to pick up some medical supplies. Finalize that bad boy. But I haven't done any other work on the shipyard screen yet. Still working on that. But now that this save feature is done, I can finish the browse functionality. So browse for a new ship. When you click on it, you can compare details of your current ship. And then I'm going to work on that snazzy idea where I just have a viewport, and then I actually instance the ship and throw it on there along with my parallax background, so you can see like what the actual ship looks like with all the weapons and thrusters on it. Because right now this is just the ship sprite. You have no idea where the weapons are. So it's got 5 weapon slots on here. It's got 4 light cannon turrets and a light beam laser turret, but you don't see where they are on there. That's kind of lame. So I want to make that happen. So yeah, pretty sweet. So that's what I'm going to work on now. But now that I've got the save functionality implemented, this opens up lots of doors for me. And man, Godot makes it really easy. I am so happy. So now I get to like actually play my game, and I can save my progress, and I can come back to it later. You know, like it's a pretty highly desirable feature. It almost feels like it's gonna be a real game now. So that's pretty sweet. So let me just drop off. Let me just go drop off my trade goods here. So I'm gonna sell some of these medical supplies. By some, I mean all. I'm gonna pick up as much xenon as I possibly can. Yeah, sweet. Cool. So yeah, anyway, that's what I've got to show. That was a pretty big core system that like every game should have. So now that I've showed it to you, let's move on to the code review portion of this devlog. All right, so code review. So let's take a look at what I did. So I looked at the documentation that Godot offers for saving games. I'm on the version 3.4, which is what my Godot version is for this. I know I can update to 3.6. I just haven't done it yet. I probably won't, because after trying to update to version 4, I just don't want to mess with stuff anymore. I just want to make the game, and Godot 3.4 gives me all the tools I need currently, so I'm not going to mess with it. But anyway, so their little process here was that what they recommend doing was identifying persistent objects. For me, the only thing that in my game that's right now that is persistent is just the player, and then like the background world data, like you know, locations you've discovered, what system you are currently in, what location you were last at, and also stuff like keeping track of changes to like factions. So if, I don't know, you start a war with another faction, that's some data that needs to persist. So what they recommend doing is just sort of adding a group called persist, and then just adding any nodes you want to persist in that group. And then any node that you want to have persist, you need to make a save function where you create a save dictionary. Why do I have this AI prompts? Can I just get rid of this forever? That would be great. Okay, cool. I figured out how to turn off that annoying AI prompt thing. Anyway, so it has you create a save dictionary that just has a lot of the stuff. You're basically just creating a type of what data you want to store, and then so any object or thing that you want to persist that's part of that group, you want to include a few things such as like the file name and also the parent, and then all this other data that you want to store is up to you. So vector 2s are not supported by JSON. I knew that already from my fiasco with trying to update to Godot 4, converting my star system mapper tool to export to JSON, and then yeah, so I already knew that. So no worries there. We just break out the values separately. So we've got position X, position Y. Depending on how your game is set up, you might want to do global position X and Y. And like for me, I'm also storing the velocity X and Y of my ship. So that way, you know, if you're loading into a star system, like you just boost it in there, you already have some this velocity. You don't want to just load in like stopped. That would be lame. So yeah, pretty cool. So that was their approach for saving and reading data. They're just kind of going through, and for every node that they get from the persist group, they're just calling the save method and running it to a file. So I took a similar approach to this, except I only had one thing I wanted to persist, like one object, and that was just the player. So I didn't need to do any of the group stuff. So let's take a look at what I did. So if I'm in my main scene here. If we go down here, we have a function called save game. So how I'm saving the game is I'm saving it in two files. I have the player data and then the world data. So the reason being is that I don't want to have like one big massive file that I need to access stuff to, because I want to be able to access only the player data in certain scenarios. Example given, the trade window. I need to have access to what the player's inventory currently is. That's player data. If I'm going to the shipyard, I want to have access to what ship the player already has, like how much money that they have on hand. That's player data. So I don't want to access and load all the world data. I just want to just take the player data. So what I did was I moved everything to the player data. So in my ship, I created a save method, which returns a save data dictionary. And this just, I kind of copied, I used theirs as a basis. I used the get file name which just basically gets the I think it gets the path of the resource so that we can instance it. And then it also gives the apparent. I'm not currently using the apparent yet, but I just threw it in there just for funsies. And then you can see here I've got my position and rotation, so I'm just throwing in my local or my relative and global positions, as well as what my current rotation is. And then I'm also adding what my velocity is, and then the other stuff that I also need to keep track of, such as my inventory data, and then my stuff like hit points, shields, boost duration, and also my cargo space. So that's the data that I need to get right now. From this data, I can pretty much get everything I need about this ship. So what I'm doing is, if we go back to main, in my save function, I am creating a new file instance, and then I am opening the save file. So because we're doing open, this will create or overwrite any existing file because we're opening it with file write, I believe. And then we're going to verify that we have an instance player. So this is just something that they were doing. They were checking that if player.filename is empty, it means that they're not instanced. So abort the save. Okay. So currently right now I'm just closing it and I'm just returning. I'm logging to the console just for debugging purposes, but I need to have some sort of way to handle if we fail a save. So I don't really have any remedial action for that yet. I need to do some brainstorming on that, but for now I'm just basically just aborting the save. I'm closing the file. I'm just returning early. It doesn't currently give any feedback that the save failed, which is a problem. I'm also verifying that the player has a save method, which of course it does, but I'm just adding that check in there anyway. So this case should ideally never fire. If it does, something is drastically wrong. Then we're calling the player's save function. So I just call player.save. In their little code sample, they were doing node.call and then the name of the method. I don't know why they didn't just do, node.save, but whatever. They probably had a reason for it, but I went with this since we already verified that it has the method. I'm safe to call it. So what we're doing then is that player.save returns that dictionary, which I'm storing in a variable called player data. And then in that player file, I'm storing it as a single line because that's what they were doing. I just copied it. We're doing 2 JSON, so we are converting it to just JSON. JavaScript object notation, if you're not familiar. And it's just a interchange format is really what it is. And we're just passing in the player data. So once we've written that to that file, we're closing that file. And then we're going to do the same process for our world file. So we're opening up another file object so that we can work with the file system. Then we're doing world file.open, and I'm opening up the world data save with the write permission, file.write. We're preparing the data that we wish to save in the dictionary. So the data that I want to persist for the world is I want to keep track of what current star system we are in. So I have this star systems auto load. So I'm saving that. I also want to keep track of the star systems map. Now this I need to go through, and I probably just need to iterate through the actual map and only store the fields I care about. That way I'm not taking up a ton of space on the user's drive. But currently this game is super tiny anyway, so it's not taking up like any space. But what I'm doing is I want to keep track of the star systems that I've explored. So if I don't have this, when I go to my map, it shows I haven't explored anything, which is obviously wrong. You want to save your exploration too. There might be some other fields I will need to save as the game progresses. So for example, what faction a system belongs to. There's probably going to be some events that will change ownership of which faction owns a star system. So I'm going to need to track that at some point. But for now, this works fine, and that's easy enough to add in the future, so I'm not worried about it. And then I'm also keeping track of the entire factions list. So the reason being for that is I want to keep track if there's any changes in the factions from your playthrough. So if factions declare war on one another, you want to have that state persist. You don't want to have it just reset back to the default every time you load a game. That's not desirable. And then this warp angle was this workaround thing I made that it basically determines where you're going to be facing and where you're going to spawn when you're warping into a system. And then during my setup space scene function, it determines whether you're taking off from a location or warping into a system by the existence of this warp angle. So if we have a warp angle, we're going to include it as well. And then what we're doing is we're just doing the same thing, world file store line, converting it to JSON, just converting all that world data, and then we're closing it. So cool. So another thing I did too is in my utility function, in my utility auto load, which is kind of like a kitchen sink for a lot of miscellaneous functions I commonly write. So if I find myself repeating code and I don't know where to put it, especially if it's something that multiple nodes throughout my scene tree need, I'll just toss it in my utility auto load. So here I've got two functions. I've got well, three actually. So I've got save player data, which just does the player save stuff, and this allows you to pass in the player data. So this function is only concerned with the file operation of actually saving it and converting it to JSON. That's it. And then I have a function to load world save, which is, again, it's only responsible for doing the file operation to load in to get the world file data. It parses it from JSON into a dictionary, and then from there it just returns that world file data. And so it just returns a dictionary. And then I have load player save, which does the same exact thing. Again, it's only concerned with the file operations of checking if the file exists, opening that file, reading the line that is stored in there, and then parsing that from JSON to a dictionary. And then we're just closing the file and then returning the file data that we pulled. So those utility functions are just doing that. Let's take a look at how we are using those in some places. So first things first, save game is used in a few places. If we do a Control F here, just in main alone, I'm using it twice in this warp to new system function. So what we're doing here is that this is called when a ship completes its hyperdrive, like boosting thing, and it wants to actually load the next location it was at. So what we're doing here is we're updating our star system variables to, set this star system that we have selected to travel to. We're setting it to be discovered. We are also getting the direction to that system that is determining our warp angle. And then we're also setting the current system as the system that we had selected, and then we're clearing out the selected system. So as we're doing that, we needed to save that world data. So I'm just calling save game because I only have one save function. Now, then from here, I'm clearing the scene, which is getting rid of any children of the main node. It's just getting rid of them all. Then what I'm doing is I'm calling load game, which is going to, which load game actually is a helper function I created. And if we look at that, this is loading the world data first, and it's using that util function load world save. We're verifying that we have data. If we don't have data, we're just returning. So if I end up with a blank screen, I know to check my console to see what happened, but I also need to have something there to handle that. If we have world data, we're also fetching the player data. And then what we're doing is we're just loading and using this world data. So the first thing we're doing here is that since Star Systems is an auto load, as soon as you run the game, it's already initialized. So what we're doing is we're setting the current system to be the system that we have in our save file. Then we're also checking to make sure that this has this data before we're doing anything with it. And the reason for that is if I make a change to my save file and I add a new field that's not going to be there in the previous save file, I don't want to break people's save files to make them worthless. So I will allow them to load it without that new field I added. And then the next time they save, it'll be populated and they won't have any problems. So that's what we're doing here. We're just checking, we're handling potentially non-existent values. So that's all we're doing there. So we're making sure that we have star system map. And since my star system map, the actual map dictionary, the list of star systems, has a few vector 2s in there. Really the only thing I want to store or I'm concerned about is whether or not we've discovered them. So all I'm doing is I'm just iterating through every single one of the entries in this stored star system map, and I'm updating the star system map entries to make sure that they're discovered is what I have in my save file. So that's all we're doing there. And we're doing the same thing for factions. We're just basically updating the entire factions list. That whole data structure converts to JSON and back to dictionary just fine. So there's no conversions I need to really do, like no shim code I need to worry about. So we're good to go there. And then I'm just saying warp angle equals warp angle, and then we're calling our setup space scene, which is my scene that handles setting up the space scene. So it adds in the parallax background. It sets the background image for that background. It creates my little stupid mouse selector thing, which I probably need to rewrite, that lets me click on stuff and like mouse over stuff to be able to view details about it. I'm also adding in the star. So that big glowy ball of gas in a star system, I'm adding that bad boy in there too. And then I'm also getting adding locations. So I'm seeing, what locations we have in our star system map for this current system. I'm iterating through every one of those, creating the locations and placing them where they need to go. And yeah, so it's setting up the star system scene. So what I did for this is I added in this player data argument to it, and I initialized it to default to an empty dictionary. So what we're doing here is that when it comes time to create the player ship, before I was just always loading in the Synthocracy shuttle scene. Well, if I buy a new ship, I don't want to like instantly lose that ship and go back to my shuttle. I want to keep that same ship. So now I'm going to have to rely on the saved player data. So what I'm doing is I'm defaulting it to use that Synthocracy shuttle, and then I'm checking for the presence of player data. So the only time this function is really called without player data passed in is when you're starting a brand new game. So other than that, you're always going to have player data, because as soon as you start it, it basically creates a save file for you, and then you're off and running. But just to be safe, we're just checking for the existence of that player data. And then what we're doing is we are loading the file name of our ship, which is the resource path. We're loading that, we're instancing it, so that way if I buy a new fancy ship, it's going to instance that ship. So cool. We're doing what we did before, where we set it to be player. We're adding our zoom camera to the player ship, and then what we're doing down here is that we are setting player variables if we have player data. So we're setting what our velocity is, we're setting our last location. So there's a little note here that says player position is handled indirectly here. So we just update the last location. So I'm just setting the last location to be the global position that we had stored, because that was the last location that our player was at. And let's see here. So player position, player rotation, adding that. We're just setting all these variables. So rotation, HP, shields, boost duration, inventory data. We're taking all that from player data, injecting it into our fresh new player scene. That way it has all up-to-date data. And I'm also going to have, I need to, when it comes time to work on ship customization, I'm also going to have to add stuff like add-ons and weapon slots in here as well. So if you change your weapon configuration from the default of the scene, that's also still going to persist when I add that. So this will easily allow me to do that. So once we've got those things set, we're just adding the player, and then I have all the other logic here the same. It's just saying, hey, if warp angle doesn't equal 0, that means that we warped in. So it's setting our rotation and our global position and our velocity and stuff for us. So we don't need to, it's overriding that. And then if we don't have a warp angle, then we are assuming that we didn't warp in. We're probably exiting from a planet or something. So then we're just saying player.global position equals last location. So that's all we're doing there. But yeah, so that's how I did that there. So every time we set up a space scene, we're loading our persistent player ship data from this save file. Really handy. So let's see, where are we doing it next? So, So next, I'm saving whenever we land at a location. So all this code is the same as when I implemented it. The only thing I added here is literally before we clear the scene, I'm just saving the game. So it's going to save all the world data, and it's also going to save the player data. And then so that's what I did there. And yeah. So then there's two other places. Well, there's one other place that I'm saving the game currently. So that is in my trade window. If we look at the code. So I had to modify this to before I was passing in inventory data, but now I just substituted that with player data. And I'm loading that with my utility function. So in my ready function, which this function is called when the node enters the scene tree for the first time, I like to always have the types specified. So I'll add that it returns nothing just for clarity. We're just loading the player save, which just gives us the player data. So then from there, I just substituted anything that was using just the inventory data alone before. It's now using the inventory data that we saved with the player data. So I did that, and then when we finalize it, I think it's on finalize pressed. We're calling the save player data function individually. So we're saving that player data. The reason being is that when we hit finalize, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we want all the changes that we made to our player data, namely the inventory stuff, like how much money we have, all the goods we bought, all the goods we sold. We want those changes to be reflected. So how I think I've got it working on this screen, this screen's a mess. I'm going to have to go through and do some heavy optimizations on it for sure. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, I'm saying original inventory data, and I'm copying that so that I can keep track of the changes made. But yeah, that's my that's really it for my save. Like it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So I had to sit there and like do some thinking about it and just kind of tweak things to make it work. But I think that was all the changes I really had to make to get this save file running. But now that I have persistent player data, I can finish up my shipyard window screen, and then I can also work on my customization window as well. So, yeah. Anyway, that's probably a shorter devlog than usual, but it's still like half an hour, but whatever. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you in whatever video I make next. It's probably going to be another Borderlands 2 video, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I already said that. Awkwardness intensifies. Thank you.